In December 1991, a young Australian medical student named James Scott set off on what was supposed to be a week-long trek through the Himalayas. But when the week passed with no sign of him, his disappearance sparked one of the most grueling and prolonged survival ordeals in the region's history. This is his story, a tale of resilience, hope, and the unyielding will to survive. In September 1990, James Scott, a 22-year-old medical student from Brisbane, Australia, sat down to write a letter. It was a simple request. He wanted to complete his medical elective in Nepal, a country he saw as the perfect place to help those in need. Nepal, one of the least developed nations at the time, was a world away from the comforts of home, but for James that was the point. He wanted to make a difference. Weeks turned into months, and no reply came. But James wasn't the type to give up. A year later, he had a plane ticket to Kathmandu in hand and had convinced his best friend Tim Hooper to join him. Just before their departure, a letter finally arrived. A resounding yes from a Kathmandu hospital. James was overjoyed. Everything was falling into place. He was excelling in medical school, had a fiancée waiting for him back home, and now an adventure in the Himalayas awaited. James wasn't a thrill seeker, but he was fiercely disciplined. A black belt in karate, he had competed nationally and won championships. He was fit, strong, and confident in his ability to handle challenges. But the Himalayas would test him in ways he never imagined. James and Tim arrived in Nepal in September 1991, 2 months before James's medical elective was set to begin. Eager to explore, they planned a trek along the Jimsum Trail, a popular route through forests, rocky landscapes, and some of the deepest gorges in the world. They hired porters and a guide, packed meticulously, and set off. The trek was a success. The weather was mild, the views breathtaking, and the challenges manageable. So manageable, in fact, that they sent their guide and porters back early, continuing on their own with minimal gear. When they returned to Kathmandu, they were riding high, and immediately began planning a second trek for December. This time, they chose the Himalayas Trail, a more challenging route with lodges along the way. But December in the Himalayas was a different beast altogether. Unprepared for the harsh winter conditions, they packed light, a few changes of clothes, a light jacket, and some books for the evenings. It was a decision that would nearly cost James his life. On December 21, 1991, James and Tim set out on the Himalayas Trail. Along the way, they met a group of German trekkers who warned them the trail wasn't worth the effort. Disappointed, James pulled out an old, outdated map and spotted an alternative route, the Gosenkund Trail. The Germans, noticing his outdated map, generously gave him a newer one. The next day, Tim suffered a leg injury and had to turn back. James, torn between staying with his friend and continuing the trek, was convinced by Tim to go on with Mark Fulton, an Australian solo trekker they had met. In a moment of distraction, James accidentally gave Tim the new map and kept the outdated one. It was a small mistake with enormous consequences. James and Mark continued on the Gosenkund Trail, but the weather turned against them. A light dusting of snow overnight gave way to a full-blown storm. Visibility dropped to near zero, and the trail disappeared beneath the snow. James, terrified, suggested turning back, but Mark was confident he could find the way. Reluctantly, they split up, Mark pressing forward, James retracing his steps. But the snow was relentless. James soon found himself lost, following a creek that he hoped would lead to safety. Instead, it led him to a dead end, a 100-foot waterfall. With no way down and no clear path back, James faced an impossible choice. He decided to climb the rock wall beside the waterfall, a feat that took him 2 grueling hours. Exhausted, he collapsed under a rocky overhang, where he would spend the next 43 days fighting for his life. James's survival instincts kicked in. He dried his clothes, rationed his 2 chocolate bars, and melted snow for water. But as the days turned into weeks, his situation grew dire. His feet turned blue from frostbite, and he developed mouth ulcers and a throat infection. Hunger gnawed at him constantly, but he clung to the discipline he had learned through karate, using meditation-like techniques to keep his mind focused. One day, he awoke to the sound of a Himalayan black bear nearby. Armed only with a pair of dissection scissors, he shouted at the bear, half hoping it would end his suffering. Instead, the bear fled, leaving James to endure the cold and isolation. Back in Kathmandu, Tim raised the alarm when James failed to return. James's sister, Joanne, flew to Nepal to join the search. Rescue teams scoured the mountains, but the harsh terrain and weather made the mission nearly impossible. Desperate, Joanne consulted a Buddhist lama who pointed to a specific area on the map, a triangle formed by the towns of Fidi, Gopte, and Talu. Skeptical but hopeful, rescuers focused their efforts there. Meanwhile, Mark Fulton, who had made it out of the mountains, confirmed that he and James had separated near Fidi. This revelation aligned with the Lama's prediction, giving the search team a renewed sense of purpose. On day 43, James heard the sound of a helicopter. Weak and emaciated, he stumbled into a clearing, waving his sleeping bag and red long johns. The helicopter circled but flew away, leaving James devastated. Hours later, he heard voices, real ones this time. Rescuers Carl Harrison and his team had found him. When they reached James, they were astounded. "You're a god," one rescuer said. "No one survives here for more than 10 days." James had survived 43. James was airlifted to Kathmandu, where Joanne waited anxiously. When the helicopter landed, she barely recognized her brother, thin, bearded, and frail, but he was alive. James was hospitalized and eventually made a full recovery, though the ordeal left him with lasting scars, both physical and emotional. James's survival is a testament to human resilience and the power of hope. His story, a blend of preparation, luck, and sheer willpower, remains one of the most remarkable tales of survival in the Himalayas. And in a twist that defies explanation, the Lama's prediction had been eerily accurate. James was found exactly where he said he would be. If you made it this far, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.